welcome to be an Artist. I'm here today with Gwendolyn Kassenaar, and she's an artist that I initially met at Resonance performances where we both were performing. Gwen, as a painter, she drew images on the windows during the performance for people to see, to be completely immersed in the feel of the performance. And I was performing as a dancer, and that led to us performing together a few times. The first performance we did together was a live mural painting and dance performance just after the second lockdown had ended. And then we also performed together in the X Lab, where we were performing in a shopfront window. So hi, Gwen.
Hello.
Thank
you for having me on your amazing channel.
We kind of met when we were kind of at a crossroad. Like for me, I started to getting into multimedia performance, and you started really to get into performance drawing. But can you tell us a little bit about your earlier beginnings? What happened before I met you?
Yeah, lots. I was thinking about this. And if I bring it right back to the very, very beginning, it really is when I was a little girl. And my grandfather was teaching me how to draw. And it was quite, we had a lot of fun together, but his way of drawing was quite formalized. Like he taught me how to draw a horse, and you'd have the rectangle for the body, and then the circle for the back of the body, and then the triangle for the neck. And then you start putting the lines around that. So that was when I was a little girl. And then in my adult life, I've always done live drawing classes, some still life, mostly drawing, but also painting classes, color courses, 4 days, just theory about color and experimenting with it. So that's kind of how it all started. And I wasn't an artist all my life, even though I think it was always in me. Having a kind of artistic career was seriously disapproved in my upbringing, even though it's nice as a hobby, but you don't do that for work. So I had a regular job. And then I was doing these drawing classes at night, once a week, twice a week. And at one point I quit and I went to art college. Mm-hmm. And my first project was called Liberation. And I felt like a horse with these things that came off, the horses that have these ton. And then all of a sudden I felt free, and it was fantastic. And then in a few roundabout ways, I allowed myself to be a full-time artist. I started with more of a practical approach with textiles and screen printing, but it very soon went completely into art. Mm-hmm. And I was also thinking about how the music came in, because I remember when I was doing these textiles, I was always listening to music in my studio. It was always jazz, a lot of Latin, a lot of Brazilian jazz. And I realized after a while that was actually in my work. I was kind of expressing what I was hearing while doing it. And then I became more conscious of that and started to work with it explicitly. So the first work I did with music was a screen print. But when I say screen print, it's very free, very experimental. It's open screen and it's very improvised, I guess. And I started working with how can I express that deep, warm sound of a saxophone? And I did that in various colors, overlaying based on the drawings I'd done. And that's when music became more explicit in my work. And I realized that rhythm was a very big part of it as well. And then I went to the Vortex to draw in the audience, so not a performance or anything. And then everything kind of happened from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Was your grandfather an artist himself, or did he just like to draw? with you?
I think I never asked him this because as a child, you're not so aware of these things. But I think now looking back, I think he would have loved to be an artist, but he was in a kind of a very Calvinist, very in a context where you just don't do that. So he did a lot of drawing, he did painting. Some of his paintings were hanging on the wall. I've got all his drawings from his drawing classes. I think he would have liked to be, and I think it would have suited him because he had a very creative mind. He came up with really interesting ideas. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's interesting. When you went to the Vortex, how did you get involved with Resonance? Did somebody ask you? Did Orly see you? I think all
Orly
have
asked
similar
me.
starting points.
Yeah, the night I did my first piece of art, the screen printing I was mentioning, that was explicit about jazz, I met her that night, which is really weird. And so we clicked, and then she said, come to the Vortex sometime to draw. And then I became involved in these kind of the salons, the artist meetups. And then I performed in that performance that you mentioned, where I was painting on the windows. So it went like that. And also you introduced me to Freedom. And then I started going to Freedom in the Vortex, which was a different thing. And I met other people there. So yeah, it started to branch out in many different directions quite quickly.
I feel like when you start doing something, it always becomes more. Like when you just start something and then suddenly you see all the opportunities you get from this, just one experience can open your eyes to so many different opportunities.
Totally. And what was also happening is at Freedom, I met a lot of people. And that brought me to other places. Like then I started going to Skronk. But in the lockdown period, my work really went online because I was always quite modest or shy, I think, about posting. And I wasn't so sure if I wanted to post my work. But when the lockdown came, it was boom. Your work was just online because everyone was online and everything was happening online. So I also met people through that, and then they became Zoom collaborations in lockdown that then became real life collaborations after lockdown. Like that's how I met Beibei and Beibei Wang, and we collaborated on Zoom first. We met in real life much later.
Yeah. The lockdown was an interesting period. You met so many people on Zoom meetings that kind of, it kind of made the world smaller in a way.
Totally, yeah.
Bigger and smaller at the same time, I find.
Yeah, that's also how I met Emily Shapiro, and then I started going to the 100 Years Gallery, and then I met other people, and that's where we had another performance together with Los and his trio. So it was all, it just branched out in many different people connections, I suppose.
Did you always, I know like a lot of your work, especially the live drawings, a lot of the times you use pastels. Did you always use pastels that much, or did you specifically choose pastels to just do these live drawings, or how did that come? Because I feel like your style is very, how do you say, it's like kind of a profound style. Everybody can recognize you drew that particular piece of art, just as you can see it in the background. It's pastels, like vibrant colors on a plain background.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because I didn't think about that. But yeah, I have used pastels maybe from 20 years ago. When I started doing still life drawing, I started using pastels and I really liked it. It's very direct. You have a very direct connection between the thing that makes color and the paper. There's nothing that interferes. A brush can flick different ways. But the pastel is very direct, and I like it that you work with your fingers. At the time when I was doing still lifes, I would smudge things out, and it would be much more realistic. But yeah, I like working with pastels, but they're a nightmare afterwards. The storage, the fixing is, it's difficult. Painting is much better that way. And I realized the way I paint is totally informed by how I use my pastels. Because the pastels are full of texture. So when I use paint, I like to use sponges, big brushes that I can flick in certain ways to have a similarity to how I can work with pastels. The colors, I don't like mixing them anymore, so I like to keep things, to keep the colors quite separate. But the black background that you mentioned, that was more recent. I was just experimenting. One day I just took a whole load of papers and I did a lot of drawings, actually quite a few based on your dance poses. And I had kind of an aubergine color. I had red, orange, light blue, dark. I had loads of colors and a black one. And I really kind of fell in love with how the colors pop on the black background. So I've kept using that. Yeah.
Yeah, they really pop out from black. Black much more so than white.
Yes. Yeah. White, I always feel that when you work on white, that is, I don't know, that it feels like it washes out a bit. Like with the black, the background is part of the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes people get stuck or they feel stuck. In dancing, it can certainly be like that because you always move in a certain way. And sometimes you stop and you like, I feel like I'm always moving the same way. Does that ever happen to you? And if yes, what do you do to kind of inspire some change or a change of direction?
On the first part of the question, what inspires me? I mean, I could almost say everything. I think if you're a visual artist, you're always walking around in the world with your eyes wide open. And the other day I found myself photographing something on the pavement because the way the utility companies had sprayed the markings for where they want to do work, I thought was fantastic. And it reminded me of something that I had been drawing in color on black. So it was color on these pavement tiles. And it reminded me of some sketching I'd done with a woman who did spoken word, and her words and letters and syllables were starting to float through space. And then when I saw these markings on the pavement, I thought, oh, that looks like that spoken word idea I had. And then I was photographing that, looking like a complete lunatic on the street, photographing the pavement. So it can be anything that catches my eye. Nature can be beautiful to see, especially for color and shapes. Music, I find really inspiring. Like I go to a lot of live music gigs and I don't always draw every time I'm there. And sometimes I close my eyes, or often I close my eyes. And then it's like this synesthesia kicks in, and I have all these shapes coming towards me in different colors, different sizes, often circles, overlapping, receding. So I find that very inspiring, and I often make like a little sketch at night or the next morning to hold on to that idea. Yeah, so it can be anything. Oh yeah, another thing I should probably mention is I have a total soft spot for 60s and 70s. You know, all the design, the shapes, the patterns, flower power, the furniture shapes that came out. I love all of it. So I think that I find inspiring as well. Yeah, and when I'm stuck, I don't often feel I'm stuck like for inspiration, but I might be working on something for a few hours in my studio and I feel, oh, I'm starting to repeat myself. And then it's my own movement. It's my own, I put on the music, I move, I do a lot of 5 rhythms movement. So I use that to get back into the flow, and it always works. Yeah.
Interesting. Can you explain 5 rhythms for the people who don't know what that is?
Yeah. 5 rhythms is a movement method founded by Gabriel Ross in New York in the 70s. And the name 5 rhythms is related to the 5 phases that you go through. So you start with flow, then you get into staccato, then you get into chaos, which is really a high energy phase. And after that, you end up in lyrica, which is a celebration of joy. And at the end, you have stillness. And when you do a 5 rhythms class, class doesn't really sound right because it's all free improvised movement, a session, let's say. You go through all of those phases, starting with the flow and then ending in the stillness in about 2 hours, which they call a wave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. I've had so much benefit from doing that artistically and also personally. And for me, it's a way of getting in touch with my gut, with my instincts, so that the thinking head goes off and I can feel what I really think without all the kind of the noise and other things. So it's I find it incredibly beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've done drawings and paintings based on that as well. Abstract, expressing the rhythms, or a kind of abstract interpretation of an experience on the dance floor. I might have been mirroring with another dancer, and then later that became like shapes in my head. And also, very occasionally, I would have some kind of vision, like in the stillness end of it, that I see some color or just a landscape or something, and I've drawn those and painted those. Yeah, so yeah, it's a big part of me, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. It's really interesting. Because I guess in a painting you want the same thing. You want some stillness, you want some movement, you want some dynamics in there as well. So I think it probably carries through all arts, because in the end of the day you want to tell a story.
Yeah.
One thing I really noticed about you, that you kind of document all of your ideas, or like a lot of ideas, in a sketchbook, and that was so fascinating to me because I had never seen a sketchbook.
Oh
I think
yes,
the
I
first time
remember.
I came over for a rehearsal, or even I didn't come over for a rehearsal, I just came over to see your studio and hang out. And I was just looking at your sketchbooks for like 30 minutes. Can you talk a little bit about how that developed, if you always had sketchbooks, this practice of documenting those ideas, and yeah, like a little bit your process with that kind of stuff, because I found that so fascinating when I saw that. Like I had never seen a sketchbook like that. It's like a whole museum in one book.
Yeah, I love my sketchbooks. It's not something I invented. When you go to art college, the first thing they say is get a sketchbook. But I think I'm on the, what can I say? I'm using it a lot. Not every artist uses it as much. And I know artists who don't use it at all anymore. I find it incredibly helpful because I always find my head is overflowing with ideas. And if I log them and I sketch them and I make some notes, then I don't need my brain power anymore to hold on to all those ideas, because they're on paper. I can relax and then new ideas come in. And if I have to hold on to all the ideas, the new ideas don't come in. So that's part of it. It's also partly like critiquing myself. Like even when I do massive sketches, like here on the back, I might do a sketch that might be, I don't know, 1 by 1 meter or 2 by 2 meters if it's extreme. And I photograph that, stick it in my sketchbook, and then I write what I like about it or what's not working, or whether I think, oh, there's a seed for an idea here, but it needs to develop, or it needs to be this or that. So it's also like having a dialogue with myself. And I find it a very useful way of progressing an idea, or like with the pastels, when I was starting to work more abstract, I kept going and going and going and going. And I would put some of those in my sketchbook and make little remarks. And you start to see what's happening. Like you were saying about me having developed kind of my own style, but that came just by itself. It was not like, oh, I'm going to do this or that, but through working and challenging yourself and looking at what you're doing, it kind of grows. So it's that's a big part of it as well. Yeah, sometimes I just have a random idea and I jot it down, and I might not think about it, and then half a year later it pops in my head.
You used it to map out the whole mural, like you had several layers.
Yeah, that's true. I do some studies in it, like composition studies, and for our mural that was massively important. It was, what was it, 6 meters long, 4 meters high, and I had no perspective. I couldn't see what I was doing, so I had to plan the composition in advance to be able to do it. But then the rest in between was all improvised.
That's interesting. It was so fun for me to see myself, little pieces of paper that represented me, like in the sketchbook.
Yeah, because we did the collaboration on Zoom, and then I screenshotted the bits I liked, and then I traced your outline on tracing paper. So because I used tracing paper, I could then overlay it and still see all the lines. And then that way I could really be creative with it and play around with it.
Yeah.
Till I was happy, and I did a few different ones and sketched that out. But yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was especially unexpected because obviously the first thing I do is look at your sketchbook. I think that's like a routine I have when I come into your studio. It's like I look at the sketchbook first. What changes for you when you work on a small scale and then on such a big scale? Like for example, the mural that is so big, the entire painting is so big that you would have to walk across the street to really look at it, which you can't do during a performance. But then I guess when you work in a very small like piece of paper, I guess there's also challenges that come with that.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the thing that changes and challenges and benefits from different sizes of artwork?
That's a really interesting question. I realized that when I work massive scale, like our mural, my own body movement is part of how I paint. I can jump to reach really high, and the act of making that gesture is part of the making. And I can get an energy in the marks that way that you cannot get on a small scale. I mean, when it comes, it feels very, is visceral the word when it comes straight from the gut. It's like that. It's very gestural way of painting.
Yeah.
When you work small, you work from your wrist, but that was like the whole arm from the shoulder.
Okay.
And I really enjoy that way of painting. It feels very instinctive. It feels very direct. And I think by moving like that, it allows me to be on a different level of consciousness. It was almost like being in some kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say trance, but something similar. So that movement I really enjoy as part of the action. Yeah, that's the energy. And then if I work on a small scale, I'm much more aware of the composition. It doesn't matter if it's figurative or abstract, I know where the borders are of this artwork. I can see them right in front of me. So I immediately start to think about the balance between what I'm creating and the empty space, and the tension between the different elements, and the space between, the space to the edge. So I think there's more control, but that's also a dangerous one when you work improvised, because I don't want to have my thinking head on too much, because it interferes with the freedom of the improvisation. So I try not to think at all and let it just come out. But I think unconsciously or subconsciously, I never know which one, I am aware of the composition much more. But even if I work on a small scale, say with the pastel this size, I will still make a movement like that, and I will still bring in some form of the gesture. And that for me is also a way of being in my zone, in this improvised state.
Yeah, so the movement is really closely related to your practice in general.
To my what in general?
Your practice, to your art practice.
Yeah. And I like to explore that further. I'm very curious, where can I take that without pretending I'm a dancer? I'm not a dancer. I mean, I dance a lot in my free time, but I'm not a dancer like you. It's a different thing. But I want to see where that can take me. Like I started doing a lot of drawing on the board behind me, which is about 2.5 by 2.5 meters. And if I stretch, I can really draw circles like we did in the mural.
Yeah.
And I want to see, how can I take that? It's like the geometry relates to your own body. And I want I'm curious. I don't know why, but I want to explore that.
Yeah, it's interesting because Claire Zakiewicz was on the podcast before, in the first season, one of the early episodes. And I feel like she moves as well, but more on the floor. I think like with all these large scale paintings that are done fast, I think if you take like 5 days to spray paint a mural and stuff, you don't have to move. But I think if you're doing a live performance, our mural was around 1.5 hours, which is short considered how large it was. I guess you need some momentum to even do that, like to physically be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's also what makes it feel so good.
I guess you said you always wanted to, like you always had music on, but when did you really get the hunger for live music?
I think probably when I started drawing at the Vortex. I mean, I'd been to live music before. My grandfather would take me to a jazz festival in the south of the Netherlands. I'd been to the North Sea Jazz Festival. So it wasn't a new thing for me, but that I started going like a lot. Sometimes, lockdown permitting, I go to a live gig every week. That really is, I think, since I started drawing at the Vortex. Yeah. Okay. And I remember you said to me a long time ago, the more you listen to live music, the more you start to understand the music and you sharpen your ear. And I thought, why does it make a difference? But it does. Yeah. I can totally appreciate music in a different way now than, say, I don't know, a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It's a language in the end of the day.
Yeah.
And there's so much to it. Energy, sound.
And the rhythm. I find the rhythm has a massive impact on how I draw and paint.
How much do you think did the screen printing inform or influence the way you're drawing now?
I'm wondering, I don't know if this is true, but I was wondering the other day, when I paint, I don't like mixing my colors. Which is hard because when you have 4 colors on one canvas and you're doing it live, and you don't want to smudge them, mix them up, and it's all improvised and fast. It's really hard not to mix the colors. And I think that might come from my screen printing. I mean, I did mix colors in screen printing, but it was in layers. And another thing I think that's come from my screen printing background is that the way I mix colors. Like here I got all these pots and with different colors, and I mix them in advance of me starting to paint. So a lot of painters will have a palette and they'll mix the colors on the palette as they paint. But they're only very small quantities that way. And I think that's definitely part of the screen printing process. So I'll mix my colors and then I paint. And I spent a long time mixing my colors. Like the performance we did in the 100 Years Gallery, I probably spent 2 whole days just mixing the colors to get the blue to go with the yellow in the way that I wanted it. And I want all the colors to have a relationship with each other and then have a relationship with the black background. So I take a long time color mixing, and that probably was born in the screen printing. Yeah.
Did you paint in 100 Years Gallery? I don't even remember anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can never see what you're doing. But
that
now
was very unfortunate. That setup was very unfortunate. I don't ever want to do it like that again.
I guess in small spaces, you sometimes don't have a choice.
That was exactly what happened. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I just thought you open the pot and you have the color, but I didn't know you actually like sit at home.
No. Well, you can do that. You can buy colors, and use those.
Yeah.
But for me, color is a very. I have a very. How can I say this? It's very important. I spent a lot of time on it. I spent a lot of time studying it, the theory, looking at other painters, how they use it is really important for me. So I can tweak things very nuanced where somebody else might go, yeah, whatever. But it's just important to me.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that. After all these gigs, no surprises.
Yeah. And I have lots of sheets of paper with different colors on it and like little recipes. I mix this with this and then different gradations and then trying them in different palettes.
Do you experiment with different surfaces as well?
Yeah, at the moment I'm going through a whole lot of experimenting with different primers of canvas and different ways of painting the background, because I've been spraying the background up till now, which is a very messy job. I started even to do it outside. It rains black dust everywhere, like my studio's been on fire. It's not good. So I've been experimenting with different types of paint that are matte enough so they're not too shiny, and different primers, different canvases.
For the people who don't know what prepping a canvas means, like what is the procedure of prepping a canvas? I assume you get it in some type of natural state. Do you get them framed already, or do you frame them?
You have both options, and it's nice to get the canvas framed and primed, because that means, well, I still then go on and spray black, which is another thing with few layers. But generally speaking, you get your canvas framed and stretched, you can start. So that's one way of doing it. And then the other way is that I have a massive roll standing over there of canvas that is a raw cotton, but you also have linen or mixtures. And then you need to paint it with a big brush with primer, which is like white paint. That's what it looks like. Maybe 1 layer, 2 layers, and then it's ready. Otherwise, if you didn't do that, the paint would soak into the canvas and disappear. And also you get an even white background.
So basically it closes the pores of the fabric, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have to paint it black because you want a black canvas.
Yeah, so I make my life more difficult, and then I spray it probably 2 or 3 layers
All right.
before, like that painting behind me, to get that so even without a stripy effect is probably 3 layers.
Okay. And then you frame it.
That one I bought framed.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But oh yeah, I've done that as well. So yes, sorry, to finalize the answer, when you have the canvas and it's primed, you then and then you buy these wooden bars that are tongue and groove from the same supplier. You build the frame, and then with a big heavy duty staple gun, you stretch it. And there's a way of doing that so that you get an even tension.
Yeah, the first time I seen that happen actually was when I was on tour with Patrick Forey, who I danced for. He was the first artist who I danced for. And because we had to transport everything to Turkey, they had to unframe everything to get it on the flight and then stretch it when we got to the venue. That seemed terrible. Like that was so much hard work. Everyone was sweating.
It's not easy. It's not, oh, a quickly staple here, there, it's done, because you start in the middle and you work your way out to make sure the tension is everywhere the same. Yeah, so yeah.
Especially when it's already a painting that's already painted, and somebody's face is like this if you pull on one side too much. Yeah, this is so interesting because when I used to just always think that things happen out of, dust and goodwill. It's just like let a canvas appear and then a canvas appears.
Yeah, it's a job. I spent like 3 days making my canvases and building the wooden frames and then all the stapling. And that's 3 days I cannot be drawing or painting. So it's a trade-off what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there people that can do it for you? Like, are there framers that just do that?
You can buy them in most sizes, most standard sizes. From there's some good supplier that will deliver them to my studio. So that's the quickest. Making them yourself is the cheapest, but then if you start thinking about the time that you can't be painting, it's I don't know. I haven't made up my mind. What I would like to do is, because the one roll I have, the canvas roll, is 2.70 meters high.
Yeah.
And I like to get a big space where I can put it on the wall and then paint a massive painting like the mural, but on canvas. That would be cool, I think.
Did this artist, do you remember the film we watched at the Vortex with the artist that did this really large scale works? Did she paint on canvas? Because she used to paint on the floor and then have it stretched or somehow mounted after, but I don't remember if it was canvas. It looked like paper to me, but
I don't know. It could be either. I saw the film, but I also spent a lot of time talking to people. And I'm desperate to rewatch that film, by the way, because I think her work was very interesting. And it had
remember her name?
Halif Al Clint. I've been looking for the film online. She works with spiritual ideas that I find very interesting. So I definitely want to look at her work to see how I can use more of my own spiritual ideas in my work. So yeah, she's definitely on my radar. But I don't know if she used paper or canvas. But if it's canvas, you can put it on a stretcher. And the beautiful thing about doing it yourself is that you can do any format. Like I've made very slim, long ones, which I like, or horizontal formats. So you can't buy those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was interesting. Yeah, it's funny how much thing goes on behind the scenes. You just see the end result sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you get into like spiritual aspects of art? Were you always interested in it? Because I remember I had a conversation with you once about spiritual jazz. Was it always something you were interested in? I know you did meditation probably for a long time. But I've never asked you that actually.
I think it's definitely not been part of my life all my life. It's more of a recent thing, maybe a few years, which is funny because my mother is a meditation teacher, but I never sought it out in a dialogue with her. Yeah, I think I was getting into it through my 5 rhythms, and then having spiritual experiences after those sessions. So that's one way. I also started reading about Eastern philosophies, Zen, Buddhism, Taoism. And yeah, there was this book I bought a couple of years ago at the festival. It was Introduction to Eastern Philosophies. And what jumped out for me was the Taoism one. So then I've been reading more about that, which I find incredibly helpful for life. But I also think there's a lot of things that fit with my nature anyway. But you can also apply to your art, like the idea of stillness is the space on the paper, the balance between your marks and the space, which kind of links with their tradition of calligraphy. I started meditating every morning, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago.
Okay. You still do that?
Yeah, every day.
That's great.
Yeah. And it's not like high flying, how I sit on a mat with my legs crossed. I just step outside and I'm in bare feet. So even if it's wet, I get a jolt from the water, and I just observe whatever I see, the plants, the street.
Yeah. I feel like awareness is a big part of the whole being able to imagine things, because if you're not aware, you can't see possibilities.
Yeah, and for me, it's all goes back to a kind of a connection with your deeper self and not the thinking head. I think for me, it's a lot to do with that. Yeah.
How do you find exhibiting stuff? Because we spoke a lot about the creation process, but you have to get people to see your work. I mean, you don't have to, but it would be nice after you put all this work in. How's that for you? Do you curate your own exhibitions? Or I know you did one recently with women in jazz media.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That was in the Toulouse Lautrec Jazz Club. And we were a group of female artists, both visual artists with painting and drawing, but also photographers. So it was a really interesting mix. I sold some work actually through that exhibition, which is great, to a complete stranger. And then to have this dialogue about what she saw in the work was fascinating. It's something I have to spend more time on. But if my time is limited.
Yeah.
So if I have to choose between creation and selling, I'm very keen on the creation and keep developing and pushing and exploring and experimenting. But I was approached by a few people to different places to display my work for sale. So I need to kind of follow up better with that, but it was also COVID that got in the way for that one.
Yeah.
Actually, before COVID, a friend of mine who's a curator wanted to organize a solo show for me to show a lot of my live drawings, the pastel ones on black paper. I was really interested. I want to do a whole show just with those, which was great. And then lockdown came. So I'm also aware that right now is not the best time to push these things. There might be restricted audience, or it might be cancelled. So
well, I saw some of the exhibition at Toulouse-Lautrec, and it was really cool because it was not like you would have it in an arts gallery, because you would have one artist as kind of a block, and then you'd go on to the next artist. But at Toulouse-Lautrec, it was just scattered around, like wherever they could fit something or wherever suited. You're painting, somebody else is painting. It's like it was like almost like a scavenger hunt to find paintings by people. And I really like that concept, because you kind of see it's very refreshing to have this change. rather than walking down a long gallery floor with one artist. And then by the time you arrive at the next artist, you almost had forgotten the first artist, like sometimes.
Yeah.
But I like this mix and match because, you know, you always got reminded of, oh, this is Gwen, this is Aurelie, this is Lay, this is, what was the photographer's name?
One was Tatiana and the other one was Monia.
Uh-huh. So I really enjoyed that. Was this on purpose or did it just happen because they happen to have nails in the wall? I don't know, like
Yeah.
sometimes that happens.
It was art displayed in a space that is not purpose built for art, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to go with what you can do. It's not there are specific spaces available on the wall. It's not designed to host different sizes of artworks. It's very much what fits where. But I liked it too because like, for example, my art is all about the energy in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So to have it in a place where you have that vibe was really interesting, rather than having it in some art gallery that is more sterile environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of how it's meant to be as well.
Yes.
In the middle of life, it's, you know, we should all be constantly surrounded by art.
Yeah.
Do you have any things lined up that we can know about?
Yeah. What I've got lined up is I'm part of an initiative called The Noisy Women Present, which is a new series of live gigs to celebrate diversity and creativity in music.
Mm-hmm.
Diversity being putting females on the spot, but also in a wider sense. And the creativity bit is relating to really making visual art part of the whole musical interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So Farah Afifi is the one who's the driving force behind this, with the blessing of Maggie Nichols.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our inaugural gig on Sunday, not this Sunday, but the Sunday after at the 100 Years Gallery. Okay. And it will be a series of gigs. So we'll have 3 gigs at the 100 Years Gallery. We're gonna perform in Café Otto in the summer. So that's an exciting new initiative to be part of. I'm going to perform with Paul Jolly in a museum in Luton. Mm-hmm. It's a museum with lots of antique instruments, so it will be interesting context. Mm-hmm. And then I think for myself, I'm very curious about taking my work in different directions. I find that we've talked a lot about my movement, but I also find that I get closer and closer to sound. So I've been experimenting with the help of Steve Beresford to mic up my canvas. So the pastels actually make a sound, and now I can amplify that sound and play around a bit with the settings on the amp to make it more distorted or more real or echoey or delayed. So the next gig, the sound of my drawing will actually be part of the performance of the music as well.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating because all these pastels have different pigments, or because all the color pigments are slightly different in texture. So some are really hard and more scratchy, and then there's colors that are more creamy and soft. So, I mean, I know them quite well, but they make different sounds. So yeah, that'll be fun as an experimentation of what sound I make. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I wish I could be there. I'm not back yet, but
yeah, it will be live streamed actually.
Yeah. Oh, really? All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to be there.
And yeah, please do. That would be awesome. And then one other thing, but this is not developed in any shape or form at all, is that I'm starting to think about animation, because what I was saying to you earlier, the way synesthesia is in my head, it is like an animation in my head. It's all these shapes that come and go, and I would love to find a way of creating the drawing in an animated way and have these shapes protrude and recede the way it happens in my mind. And I met an artist who is a motion graphic designer, so I'm going to meet up with him in a few weeks' time and see. But this is completely new. I don't know where it will lead to, but it's something I'm interested in exploring.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
There's always many things
I
that
know.
we can think of. It's just finding the time and picking the ones you really want to go with.
Yeah. But that's the great thing about experimentation. It's you can try something and decide, say yes or no. Anything is allowed in experimentation. It's not really a result-driven practice. It's an experiment-driven practice. So you always end up a winner because you either end up with a yes or a no, and both is fine.
Yeah. Like today I spent the whole day with Halim, who you know, the Korean flutist, for people who don't know her. And we experimented just moving, breathing. I was drawing. At one point, she was with her flute on my drawing. We were on the floor and on the wall. And at one point, we were both using our voice, which was totally new for me. And it was just experimenting, see how we can connect.
Yeah.
Very similar to how we started, because we just started with experimenting and playing.
Yeah, I remember that now. I almost forgot about that too.
Yeah.
That wasn't that was in a different studio than the one we did the rehearsals in for the mural.
Yeah.
I think we were doing handstands and all kind of things.
But we had no agenda, and that was the beautiful thing. There was no deadline, no show, nothing planned. We just were there to have fun together and see what we could do artistically together. Yeah.
I think that is also really important, is to keep experimenting, because it's very easy to just go from gig to gig, and it is, in a certain way, you have to do it because that's just what life is like. Like, you can't always disappear for 3 months to just play. But I think it's very important to keep doing those experimentations because so much comes from it.
Yes.
And it's also very, I find it very refreshing. It refreshes your mind in a way because you don't have this pressure that can sometimes be quite heavy.
Yes, yeah. Especially if you have to develop something new in a short space of time. Yeah, it's important. And I really want to remind myself of that, because I've got a few gigs lined up now in the next 3 months. I want to make sure I can spend time in a studio and develop what I want to develop. But I think this series of gigs that I'm involved with, they're very open-minded. I will do the visual art on every gig, and I can really also see it for myself as a platform for experimentation.
Yeah, that's the good things when the gig is already experimental to begin with, I guess. Like, it's two in one.
Yeah. And that way I can still line up my own desire for experimentation with the gigs that I'm doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Is there anything you want to say to finish it out, or?
No, I just thank you for having me. And I think it's really interesting, this the way you look at being an artist, because it's not just about the actual work, it's about the whole being, the whole life, the thinking. How did you get into it? And I watched a few of your videos with Claire and with a couple of others, and it's fascinating. I think it's great that you're doing this.
Yeah, even for me, it's I'm so inspired after these talks because I mean it's all about the process, regardless
Mm,
of which discipline you're doing. It's always for everyone. It's always all about the process.
yeah,
And I've read so many biographies of artists, different artists, musicians, painters, everyone, all my life. So now I finally get to just talk to people and like sit there for an hour and pick people's brains. That's amazing to me.
yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
and it's amazing to listen to, and it's inspiring to hear other people's stories. Even artists I know that come on your channel, I still hear lots of new things about them.
yeah, I know you, and I've heard so many new things today.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna link all your information with your website and social media in the description in the description box below.
Yeah,
And
great.
thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you.